Good evening. Welcome to the Hingham Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday evening, January 9th, 2018. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Oh, pardon me. Tonight is January 16th. Looking at the minutes, January's just flying by. Our first order of business is approval of minutes from the January 9th meeting.
Move to approve the minutes of January 9, 2018.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, next up, Mass DOER Green Communities Program in Hingham. I see Mr. Moyer's here. Tom, how would you like to handle this discussion? The board needs to make a decision tonight about a warrant article.
Yep. So the board, so you guys discussed the merits of this at the last meeting, I think, at length. You know, I think we heard from the committee and what the work that they've done and where they think this ought to go and where the potential for it to go is. The vote before you tonight is a cursory vote. It's something the board probably really doesn't have to do, but I would suggest it because we've had a public dialogue around it, and that is whether or not to move a warrant article to town meeting to discuss, to see if the town would accept the energy stretch code. And if you want to do that, I think that that's a proper approach, and then that greases the skids or allows for the Energy Action Committee to continue their application process for the Green Community Program, which is due, I think, in September, if I remember right.
Paul, any comments?
No, I spoke to Tom after the meeting and expressed generally my support for the idea of going forward. So that's where I am.
I appreciated last week. That was a great presentation, and in particular, it was helpful for me to see what other communities are doing, particularly with respect to the staffing. On one hand, this program is terrific because it has the potential for grants, but those grant applications require a lot of effort, and we're always conscious of that. And earlier, I think it was last night, I also got an email from the chair of the school committee. And Brad, I know that Scott Sear on your committee has had some initial conversations with the school department. My sense is that the chair of the school committee and the school department like the idea, but I think are also interested in a little bit more information, probably similar to what we heard last week. You know, some of the same. I think the school department understands that they would need to provide some support and some resources for the energy reduction plan, and that they want to honor those commitments. So I think that's reasonable. What I expressed to Liza was that adopting the stretch code is a requirement for us to continue the green community application. It doesn't obligate us to become a green community, and also the stretch code, it's not as if that has a shelf life. So if, you know, I know you're trying to gear up for an application in September, on the chance that may, for whatever reason, may not be ready, we could do it, we could apply the next year, we would still have the stretch code in place. I know that the building commissioner is supportive of it, and as I think you pointed out last week, other communities have adopted the stretch code even though they're not green communities. So the stretch code in and of itself, many could say, is a very positive thing. So, you know, with that in mind, I'm inclined to agree with you that we should submit the article to adopt the stretch code. I would ask that, Brad, your committee continue in particular to have dialogue with the school committee, because they're going to be an important partner in this partnership that we have going forward. So I would be inclined to do that. Did you have anything else to add? No, and if so, could you come up to the mic so the audience could hear?
Brad Moyer, 23 Colonial Road. Just to follow up on that point, we've already been in conversations with the school committee about getting a formal date,
Great.
which we're hoping to conclude by the end of this month, and if not, then in early February, we will give them the presentation, same level of information and whatever else they'd like to move this forward. So, absolutely.
Thank you. I think that'll be helpful because I think when we go into town meeting, I think it's always to the benefit of an article if all the town boards and committees are all in consensus on the warrant article, and certainly that's what we'd want. I would also ask, last week, you very generously said that the Energy Action Committee, to the extent that you can, would be willing to provide assistance to us in moving through this program. I think we're really going to need that. So I appreciate it. I understand there's some things that staff will have to do, but having the committee's assistance, I think, will be very helpful too.
Absolutely, and I think as I've indicated in communications to Tom and you, we certainly see this as an organizing principle for our committee. As we've said on many other occasions, we've kind of plucked the low-hanging fruit. Now it's time to move on to bigger and bolder initiatives, and so this for us is a great opportunity for our committee really to push forward and do some very good work for this town, so we are fully behind it.
Great. Well, and I would just thank the committee for all its work. I think when you came in the summer, I think we all realized that there was a lot of work to do in order to get where we are tonight, and it's to the credit of the committee's hard work that that this is ready for town meeting.
Thank you very much. I'll certainly pass that
and
on to
then,
the committee.
what we'll do, obviously, is when that'll get submitted into the warrant, the advisory committee will have hearings, this board will have hearings, and so there'll be opportunity for more public discussion and visibility.
That'd be great. We welcome that and hope to have it. There's no secrets, nothing we want to hide here. The more we can put out, I think, is the better for us, the town, and the program.
Great. Okay. I'd make a motion to submit a warrant article to adopt the stretch code for inclusion on the warrant for the 2018 annual town meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Terrific. Thank you so
very
much.
So much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
for coming in.
Next, we're going to talk about the Town of Hingham street acceptance requirements. And this is going to be a preliminary conversation. And Susan Murphy, Real Estate Counsel from the town, is here. Susan, perhaps you could just give us and the viewing audience just a summary of what this is about.
Okay, so when a new subdivision road is built, or in some more rare instances, if you have a way in town that's been a private way for many years and the residents wish it to become a public way, there's a statutory process that must be followed in order for a town, a street in the town to become a public way. So there's some basic minimum statutory requirements, but the process is fairly not complicated, but has a number of steps. And historically, Hingham has had a process because there is a legal process that has to be followed, but it's been more of an informal process. There is a general bylaw that has a deadline of October 1st for the submission of a petition for the acceptance of a way. But other than that, the town never had any formal policies or procedures. For many decades, it was run out of the Selectmen's office, which is appropriate, but you had staff who had just done it year after year and said, okay, one came in and just started the process. What we've discovered, I've been doing this now approximately 7 years, and there haven't been many street acceptances. But when one came up in approximately 2013, and I started working with staff in the Selectmen's office, I realized, okay, they're signing this petition and they're, certifying that they own the road and et cetera, but they don't provide any documentation, title information to back that up. And so I started doing some research, and it was taking a lot of town resources for me to do the work. So we started researching, and I was working with the town engineer at the time and the planning department on, what's the best practices and looking at what other towns have been doing. But as I said, there really haven't been a lot of subdivision roads that have been approved and come forward for acceptance in Hingham. So it kind of fell to the back burner. But as the subdivision applications are heating up at the planning board, and there's a petition that came in from a developer for this coming town meeting, we went back and revisited it and said it would be best management practices for the town going forward if the Board of Selectmen, memorialized in writing what those practices should be. So we looked at a number of other communities. A lot of the communities are very similar in the process that they follow. But, Hingham it's always appropriate for Hingham to look at how does the process work, how does staff like to review these before they make recommendations to the selectmen, and then tailor it to what's the process that's best for Hingham. So I have been working on a draft. John Coughlin's been, answering questions as appropriate in his town council role. And I'm in the process of continuing. We have a draft that's out there, but it's going to need some kind of fine tuning and tweaking. And so we're going to be working with primarily the town engineer and the director of community planning on a process that's going to work the best for Hingham, and hope to bring that back to the board maybe your next meeting or the meeting after, if possible, your next meeting.
Thank you. Yeah. And, for the benefit of the audience, a lot of times I think it's been our practice in the last few years that when we have policies or procedures that are either being modified or perhaps documented for the first time, what we like to try to do is have them introduced in one selectman meeting, which gives the board time for a little bit of initial discussion, an opportunity for public input, and then come back and take a final vote. And that's actually what we're doing tonight. I had a chance, I know we all received these documents late last week. I had a couple minor suggestions to Susan. The one thing I suggested is that that the selectmen should solicit recommendations from staff. I think the original language said the selectmen might do that. I think this is a place where we have expertise in the departments, and I think a best management practice is that we do check in with them. But other than that, the process I thought worked. The process as documented looks good to me.
I have a comment. If the developer is submitting an application for consideration that the roadway that's proposed contains waivers, contemplating that it would remain private, but at some point in the future, the roadway is offered for public acceptance, does that mean that the selectmen are going to be tasked with accepting the road as it's constructed with the waivers?
No, under state law, the selectmen, in effect, have a veto power. Someone could build the most perfect road ever constructed in the town of Hingham, and if the Board of Selectmen, for whatever reasons, policy reasons, determine we do not want to adopt a layout of this road, then town meeting cannot accept it. So at the end of the day, anyone can file a petition, but no one is entitled to their street becoming a public way. So even if you got a citizen's petition that said we want the town to make X street a public way, if it doesn't go through the statutory process and the selectmen prior to town meeting don't vote to adopt the layout, it cannot be accepted by town meeting. So there's never a situation where the selectmen are required or have no choice but to create a public way.
Well, the existence of waivers, what weight is that attached?
So Paul, let me just back up for a second to explain. The waivers that Mr. Healy is referring to is that when someone applies for a subdivision approval, what they're having approved is the actual road. It's a subdivision road approval. And there are local Hingham Planning Board rules and regulations that govern how the road must be built. All sorts of specifications, width, depth, materials, types of berms, endless number, many requirements. But the applicant for the subdivision approval may ask the planning board to waive certain of the requirements. And the planning board needs to waive the appropriateness of the waiver in each specific situation. So in some instances, the planning board will grant more waivers if there is a representation that the road will never be put up as a public way. And in fact, there are certain subdivision roads that it states right in the deeds that the street you live on will never be a public way in the town of Hingham. Residents move in after the fact and they're like, yeah, but we'd really like the town to take care of it or plow it. And they come to the Board of Selectmen, but then the concern is, and usually it will be DPW or the engineering department, will come to the Board of Selectmen and say, the problem is with this list of waivers, it creates liability for the town to maintain this way. And therefore, in the history that I've been involved in the town, the selectmen have always declined to adopt those layouts and they've never been accepted. So that's an example where, you know, the residents have come forward, notwithstanding the intent for a private way, wanted it to be accepted, and after reviewing it, the selectmen felt it wasn't prudent and declined to adopt the layout, and therefore it never became a public way. Does that answer your question, Paul?
It speaks to my concern.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're not buying into roadways that would become prohibitively expensive to maintain in the future.
And it sounds to me as if what this is really just doing is it's documenting the process that the town has followed for quite a long time.
Right.
And which, if I'm hearing Susan, the selectmen have always and will retain the authority whether or not to recommend a street layout. But the benefit of this process is that a lot of things reside in people's heads.
Right.
And
Right.
This ensures that good practices will continue. It also sets expectations for everybody, including developers who might want to contemplate a subdivision, and that may help when those things come to the planning board.
Right. And you want to make sure that with each petition you consider, that you're getting the same information and the same types of information and the reports from all of your departments that you wish to get reports from. And this kind of lays it out so everybody knows what the map is.
Well, it
to get
also
there.
kind of, to me, by laying out the process, it also sort of lays out a lot of the criteria and the considerations. And one thing that I've heard from people, you know, on a variety of subjects is, I just want to know that whatever it is I'm asking the town is getting evaluated the same way as everybody else. And that, you know, somebody at a different point in time got a different answer. I think when people feel like decisions, particularly ones they don't like, feel subjective, that's just not a good place to be. And again, I think this policy is helping prevent that on this subject. So
That kind of dovetails into my concern about waivers, because I think there are some things that I know historically the planning board will never waive. And there are some things that it will, but it's on the express agreement that the roadway won't become the responsibility of the town. So I don't want that blurred in the future going forward.
No, and I believe that if a petition were to come forward after that condition was imposed on a subdivision, the planning board would report that to the Board of Selectmen. So one of the legal requirements, and that's what you're being asked to do tonight with respect to Lewis Court, is that you refer it to the planning board, and the planning board has 45 days to report back to the Board of Selectmen with its comments, questions, concerns. Now, if it's a road that they just finished approving as a subdivision road, and they approved it with the anticipation of becoming a public way, probably their report back will be short and favorable. But if it's a road that they expected to be a private way, then their report would say, you know, dear Board of Selectmen, here's the conditions, this was never intended, here's all the reasons why we don't recommend it. So that, I'm just saying, you know, kind of anticipating that's probably how that would be handled by the planning board.
Okay. So we will take this up again no earlier than 2 weeks from now. I
Right.
think one of the things I mentioned to Susan is that as we're getting into, budget and warrant season, I don't know that we'll be 2 weeks tonight. It'll be at least 2 weeks, so there's an opportunity to make sure that we get input from staff and citizens. And so perhaps you can also let Tom know when you've had the conversations with staff, and I think it would also be helpful to the extent that there are changes to the document, if our board could get a copy of the revised procedures, by the Friday before our meeting. That just gives us a window to ask any questions that we have and read through it.
Right. And just so you understand, from a timing standpoint, the petition for Lewis Court and the fact that the planning board has other pending subdivisions right now spurred moving this back up to the top of the pile. This isn't a document that has to get done for town meeting or for warrant article for town meeting, but as the planning board is moving towards subdivision decisions over the next month or two, having all of the staff kind of on board of looking forward, if the planning board knowing if we approve the subdivision, then these are the things we need to be thinking about going forward, will help the planning board as they make these decisions in the next couple of months.
Well, thank you. I think this is good work, and I think we're going to get some good clarity out of it, and as I said, expectations and consistency in how we handle these requests going forward is very helpful. So should we talk about Lewis Court?
Sure.
So that is the next item on the agenda with a possible vote. Who's going to walk us through this one? Is this?
So there's in connection with the package that I forwarded a week or so ago, there was a memo dated January 8th addressed to Tom, in which I laid out, and of course I have my whole pile here, but for some reason that memo is not in front of me. Do you have the January? Thank you very much. Sorry for that. So this lays out the policy itself, as you know, is many pages. But what this lays out is the statutory process. And this is the main role of the Board of Selectmen, is walking through the statutory process. So what is recommended or proposed for tonight is that the board vote its intent to lay out the road and refer it to the planning board. So that starts the clock for the planning board. And what happens is the planning board has 45 days to report back to you. Now, they could take longer, but what happens after 45 days is if the board was otherwise ready to, or was running up against a town meeting deadline and wanted to move the road forward, after the 45 days, the board could then schedule its vote to adopt the official layout. But if the planning board needed more time because they're waiting on inspections or information, and and the board was willing to wait for them, the board can wait. It's just that in order to keep the process moving, the statute gives the planning board a window, and it's requested to act. But that doesn't mean if they take longer, the selectmen couldn't decide to wait. But what you're doing is triggering that review process. And what needs to happen is we need to back it all up. So you look at what date is town meeting, and back it up from there. So as you can see, there's a good amount of time, because if the selectmen choose, after getting all of the reports, to adopt the layout, which will go to town meeting for acceptance, that needs to be done prior to April 16th. But you also need to give 7 days notice to the abutters, so then that would have to happen by April 11th, so you'd have to have, you keep backing up. But I would say you probably have a couple of months before the board has to decide if it's going to adopt the layout or not. Now, that being said, if you want to make that decision before the warrant goes to print, then you have less time if you want the recommendation of the advisory committee in the warrant as opposed to in a supplement. So that's the other time frame, is the kind of the closing of the printing of the warrant. So it probably, if possible, I believe that this is already well on its way. Inspections have happened. The planning board is in the process of giving a punch list to the developer. This is pretty well down the road already, so I don't believe there's going to be any timeframes. And the planning board will be able to report back to you well within the 45 days. It's just we're waiting for a lot of the more legal documentation. So for example, title certifications to determine who owns the interest in the road, and then waivers from all of those owners so that they would not bring any claims against the town for taking the public way. So it's really more the legal paperwork that the applicants needs to keep going on as opposed to the technical, which is mostly done.
And I would just say that Chair of the Advisory Committee was in the audience a short time ago and had to go to her own meeting. We should strive to have this in the warrant. I mean, I understand there are a lot of different factors, but we should strive to have this ready for the warrant so that it does not have to go in a supplement, and it has the very same public process everything else does. So I'm glad that we're getting this tonight, because it sounds like if we take this vote, which I'm inclined to do, to initiate the process, we could perhaps complete it, and it would be in time for the warrant.
Right. As I said, getting the waivers of the owners of the interest in the road and their lenders is the lead time item, and I know that the petitioner's attorney is already working on that. I've been communicating with him the last couple of weeks. So it's going to be up to them as to how well they're able to move that paperwork along.
And I would let them know that, just in my opinion, it's to their advantage to have that concluded before the warrant goes to press.
Okay, and I'll confirm,
I mean,
I'll find out with Tom, and I'll confirm what that date would be.
Do you have any
I do.
questions, Paul?
I do. Was there a waiver with respect to the length of the roadway? Do you know?
What, I do not have, because I was not involved in in advising the planning board on the subdivision approval. I was involved on some tangential issues related to sewer easements and those types of things. But I don't have the details. So what I would recommend is that the planning board and the town engineer and DPW and other officials are going to be making reports to the Board of Selectmen in the next month. And if you have questions, perhaps you can give your questions to Tom, and Tom could forward those to the respective departments, and they can provide responses to you in their reports. That might be the most efficient way to address any questions that you have about the actual roadway. We could also get you a copy of the decision, Paul and Mary, if that would be helpful, if you'd like to see the subdivision certificate of action and see the waivers that were granted.
Okay, that'd be good.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's a
I'd like
good
that.
idea, thank you. Any other questions or comments about Lewis Court? Okay, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. Let's see. I'll move that we express the board's support or intention to lay out the extension of the existing public way known as Lewis Court as a public way, as shown on the plan. I assume this was submitted with the intention to be a public way.
Yes.
As shown on the plan entitled As-Built Plan, Lewis Court, Hingham, Mass., dated 28 September 2017, revised 3 January 2018, and to refer to the proposed layout to the planning board in accordance with the applicable law.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the explanation.
Yep.
The next item on our agenda, we are going to be taking up 8 warrant articles, and I realize that it's not January 20th, but we actually don't have to wait to take up warrant articles until the warrant closes on the 20th. And as we all know, the warrant process is it's a lot of very important work that involves a number of groups, including our colleagues on the advisory committee. And we wanted to take this opportunity to discuss and potentially recommend 8 of what we call the perennial warrant articles, which are warrant articles that appear each year in the warrant related to a variety of subjects that we can then pass on to the advisory committee so that we're all staying on task, and also inevitably every year in the warrant a few things come up that are a little unexpected or that require greater focus of time. Recreational marijuana seems to me like it could be one of those topics, and talking about these warrant articles now gives us a little room to do that. So Tom, could you take us through? We'll maybe start with Article A.
So Article A, which would presumably become Article 1 in the warrant, is the Hannah Lincoln Whiting Fund. We're recommending Laurel Cosman to become the committee chair for this fund for this year. And we've
You ask her.
spoken with Laurel and has agreed to do so.
So Lori's my neighbor, so I'll just publicly say thank you for all your great work at the senior center and for agreeing to be one of the members of the Hannah Lincoln Whiting Fund Committee. So with that, I'd make a motion that we recommend Laurel H. Cosman, 16 Queen Anne Lane, to be reelected a member of the committee to have charge of the income of the Hannah Lincoln Whiting Fund for a 3-year term.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. One down.
So Article B, which is to assume liability for the DCR work. So every year, the DCR asks that we pass an article which requires the town to assume liability for DCR work on town property.
And this is essentially, it's something that DCR likes to have on hand so that if they have to come in on an emergency or unexpected basis, they've got the necessary, we've got the necessary waivers of liability so that they can get right to work for us.
That's right.
Okay?
Move to recommend favorable action on Article B.
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So Article C, I'm going to recommend that we table Article C. Just want to finalize some language there. If you don't mind, we can bring that probably back the next time we're doing articles.
Okay.
We're moving forward to Article E. I think we're in Article E now. So that is the salaries of town officers, and this is an article to set to fix the salaries of the elected town officers.
Yep, and basically what's here in this language is recommending what's in place for this year with no changes to the selectmen, assessors, town clerk, and municipal light board. Any questions or comments?
No. Move to recommend favorable action on Article E.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I would also just note that, that these salaries that are part of Article E are reflected in the budget documents that this board has already reviewed and the advisory committee's reviewing. Article G.
So Article G contemplates transferring a portion of the stabilization fund for the purpose of reducing the FY19 tax rate.
So, Tom, I just wanted to look in my budget. This is from the school, these are from some of the building projects that we had many years ago. Is that correct?
It is. It's from the former school administration building, municipal light plant building, and the former police station.
And so the amount in the forecast that I see coming in as revenue is $178,836. So this is, again, revenue. This year, it's $178,000. When we have this fund, we try to spread it out over a period of time. And any questions?
None.
Okay, I'm going to recommend that the town appropriate the sum of $178,836 from the stabilization fund for the purposes of reducing the FY19 tax rate.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Article I.
Article
Oh, H,
I
sorry.
think. Article H is looking to appropriate $500,000 from the Meals Tax Stabilization Fund to reduce the FY18 tax rate.
450.
500, that was we
Typo.
have 500, I believe, in the,
You know what, Tom, I see 450. I see 450. I think I was reading the line from
Was it
the light plant.
from the light plant?
Yep,
Okay.
I see
Okay.
450. And we can, yeah. So again, we've, as the town collects meals tax revenue, one of the things that we talked about was using that money to defray the cost of the middle school project.
Right.
Town meeting was very clear when the meals tax was adopted several years ago that it wanted to use the meals tax money for capital expenditures as opposed to rolling it into the operating budget. So for several years, we collected money into a stabilization fund, and what we're doing is we're releasing that a little bit at a time over a period of several years. So I'll make a motion that we recommend the town transfer the sum of $450,000 from the meals tax stabilization fund for the purpose of reducing the FY19 tax rate.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Article I.
Article I is the municipal lighting plant article. This is to fund from the municipal light plant receipts an amount not less than $450,000, though in recent years it's been closer to $500,000.
So the light plant doesn't, this is what's called a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. And I would just make a note, and Sally asked that we could note this just for our minutes, that in our fiscal year 19 forecast, we are carrying this at amount of $500,000. So with that, I would recommend favorable action on Article I.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So Article J is an article asking to cap the amount that can be spent out of the building department revolving fund at $300,000.
And Tom, some of, Article J relates to when you made your budget recommendations for the building department,
Right.
you were recommending that some of the salaries with the plumbing and electrical inspectors and some of the staff be paid for out of this revolving fund based on
That's right.
an allocation.
That's right.
So this article, this is required and is linked to the building department budget that Tom is recommending.
Exactly.
And I think the balance in this account, if I remember correctly, last year was well over $400,000.
Yes.
I know on the advisory committee, we've had talk about the fact that that balance has accumulated quite a bit over the years. Okay, any questions?
None.
Okay, make a motion?
Sure. Move to recommend favorable action on Article J.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And the last warrant article?
Article K is set to limit the total amount to be spent from the Elder Services revolving fund at $60,000.
Which is, I believe, what it's been for the last several years. And I remember in Barbara's budget submission, there was a summary of the revolving funds and the usage. Any questions?
None.
I'll make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article K.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's a start.
Absolutely, absolutely. Next on the agenda, we are actually approaching the time when we're about 6 months into the year, and the board thought that it would be a good idea to just kind of check in and see where we are in terms of our goals and objectives, also recognizing for the next few months as we conduct the business associated with town meeting, that this board and staff's time is limited. And so as we think about doing things outside the budget and the warrant, we thought it would be a good idea to kind of look at some of these goals because it might help us in terms of prioritizing our work for the next few months.
good idea.
Tom, I know you gave us a couple of different documents, so I'll turn it to you to walk us through.
Sure. So we have, 30 or so goals identified in this document. How do you want to do this? Do you want to go through each individual and speak to what we've accomplished to date? Happy to do that if you'd like.
Yeah, I think, some of the goals and objectives have to do with what we do on an ongoing basis.
True.
Things like the warrant, the budget, looking for opportunities. What I might ask is if you could sort of headline some of the initiatives that might be a little bit new and different.
Sure.
For example, I know that we had an initiative around, perhaps like looking into tax relief,
Yep.
which is something a little bit above and beyond. So maybe if we could highlight those, and then if Paul or I have any questions about anything else, we can ask.
Sure. So we'll start with that one. It was to identify and pursue opportunities to assist the neediest in our community. My note to date suggests that the town staff has, and I met with them early last week, with the treasurer, the town accountant, and a few others to discuss the elder services department head, et cetera, to discuss tax relief options via some of the new options within the Mass General laws. And what we identified was that the new options seem to be just that, brand new, with no to very few other communities having adopted them to date. So instead of recommending that we jump headlong into these unknown waters, I think what your staff is recommending to you is that you would hold off on this year and perhaps identify and appoint a working group, if you would, to assess the potential impact of some of these relief options. So that seemed to be the unanimous kind of consensus around the table as we were discussing this idea.
Makes sense.
Okay, the next was, for instance, the harbor area warrant articles, and we had a goal to implement those as approved by town meeting and within a timely basis. I think the Harbor Development Committee has been active and engaged in moving forward with the planning stages of the Harbor Resiliency Program, as they refer to it. As past funding for the engineering and design work is expended, future articles for actual construction stages should be anticipated. So I think that's pending.
Yeah, and just a few meetings ago, this board adopted the recommendation of the Harbor Development Committee with respect to how high to elevate the wharfs. So they're making great progress, and I really appreciate the degree of collaboration that's taking place between the Harbor Development Committee and the Bathing Beach trustees, and would thank in particular Bill Reardon and Alan Peralt for the work they're doing together.
So this is an ongoing one, but I'll point it out just because I think the town has made some excellent progress towards it, and it is relevant to tonight's meeting. That's you guys, the board sets an annual goal to pursue grant funding options and bring external money from elsewhere in the state or the federal government back into Hingham. And I would just suggest that your vote earlier tonight was to forward a warrant article for the Green Community Program, which will do exactly that if we get so far as to be designated as a green community. You're looking at $150,000 to $200,000 a year in grant money to come back to the town. So this is a perfect example of the kind of initiative that I think this board has been pursuing and successful with. So assess community needs. I know that also, and the formation of task forces is appropriate. It sounds like something we do on a regular basis, but that's a new goal this year. And I have something here that I just wanted to identify, because I think this is relevant also to very recent meetings. The board has, and as I've worked with this board, I can tell you that in the public that this board is uniquely aimed at creating an efficient government. And while I applaud that effort, I can point to the fact that in the last 2 meetings, we've actually discharged 9 inactive committees. To that end of an efficient government, you've also, over the past few months, appointed 2 task forces. So we're trying to create an efficient group of boards and committees, I think, and with your leadership, we've been doing that. So those two task forces that have been appointed are the Route 3A Task Force, which is tasked with continuing the research and outreach necessary to forward the discussion of the 3A traffic problems and then report that back to the board. And secondly, to the Compressor Station Task Force, which has been tasked with researching and advising the Board of Selectmen on developments surrounding the potential development of a compressor station at the Fore River Shipyard.
And the compressor station's having its introductory meeting tomorrow night?
They are.
Yep, and thank you for attending to give them their charge. So
Yep, I will
one
do
of the
that.
things we've done with both these task forces is not only appoint them, but we've drafted very specific charges. And as we think about good government and good practices, I think it's a good idea to give committees defined charges and also to provide timetables for completion of different items.
Certainly reduces questions later.
Sure.
Another goal to highlight is the leverage. We had asked that we leverage the website and social media tools for better communications from boards and committees and departments. And I'd like to report that I think we have two very active boards and committees doing exactly that. And that's both the Hingham Veterans Council with Janine Suchecki's leadership, and the Long Range Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee with the energy provided by Katie Puzo in terms of seeking an alternative method for getting their message out. And I was at their meeting last week, and the Recycling Committee is adamant about finding new and better ways to do exactly that. And they're targeting social media. They have some very knowledgeable members on that committee. And certainly with Katie's energy, I expect this to move forward pretty well. So,
And I would just add that I believe at the MMA meeting that you and I are attending on Friday and Saturday, that there are a couple of workshops around communities using social media, and that was one that I put a note next to, because I think a lot of us in communities are looking at the way people get their information and trying to understand how to do that in a municipal system as well, when you have boards and committees where individuals can't speak on behalf of their board or committee. So I'm looking forward to that workshop in particular.
yeah, there's a lot of unique challenges when municipalities dip their toes in the social media waters.
Yeah, I'd also noticed that since we have the police chief here in the audience, I think the Hingham Police Department in particular, as I look at our departments, does a great job of getting information out on Facebook and Twitter, and that's everything from informational to road closures and other things. And I think you've done some practices, and Steve Dirth in particular, that we can potentially leverage in other departments.
Yes.
I won't give them up, though.
Yeah, he does a great job. Also, we sought to explore sewer solutions for South Hingham. I would remind the public and the board that the Selectmen hosted the South Hingham Study Group in December and heard their final report. It's anticipated that this report will inform continuing efforts to engage in appropriate discussions regarding economic development in South Hingham, to include sewer options for sure. So that's significant progress.
You know, and I would just add, as we're heading into the budget season, and I've started as the liaison to the school department, gotten some of the initial budget information from the schools. As you look at our revenue growth in Hingham, it is slowing down. It's been slowing down for the last few years, and we have a lot of great departments that want to provide a lot of great services to the community. And some of them cost more money, and I would rather expand the tax base than ask people to reach into their pockets and dig a little deeper. Obviously, we have to do that in a responsible and balanced way, but sewer solutions for South Hingham that's all about economic development and the potential to broaden and diversify our tax base a little bit, which I think is worth pursuing, again, in a responsible way.
I'd agree. town meeting voted a sewer overlay district up there a number of years ago. We're still in the talking stage, but fortunately, the stakeholders in the area are invested in the conversation, so it was a productive one in the South Hingham Working Group. We know what we have to do, it's just a question of taking the next step.
Yeah, I would also say that, you know, these things are multi-year efforts, and
They sure are.
sometimes in municipal government, the urgent crowds out the important. And as we look at this year, one hope that I have is that we're able to allocate a little bit more of our resources and give staff the opportunity to advance some of this work, because I think in terms of its potential impact on our community, it's very significant.
Totally agree.
Also, just like to point out that in our never-ending quest to provide both legal and ethical support to the town, all employees and committee members have taken conflict of interest training and assessments at the end of 2017. Harassment training has been provided to all employees in November of 17, and an open meeting law seminar is planned for all department heads and committee chairs in early February. So, you know, making progress on that goal as well. A lot of boxes ticked there. Regarding the Aquarian litigation, the board has filed for further appellate review, and additionally, the town has filed for intervenor status in the ongoing rate case with the Department of Public Utilities. With regard to union contracts, we had 4 union contracts pending coming into the year. We have settled with the library and police personnel, and are in active negotiations with both the fire and DPW unions. And that's kind of what I highlighted as.
I would just add one more, which is that as we've been talking about all the different capital projects, one of the goals that we set early in the year was to work with the advisory committee to start understanding some of the financials, which might give us a line of sight into what the town can afford, what that might look like, how quickly we can move. And that advisory working group, I think, created a framework and an analysis that has started that conversation.
That's right, yeah, they did that work, and we hosted them here, and they presented it to the board. Again, progress on that goal for sure.
Yeah. And I'd also just note that, you know, we set these goals in July, and if I think about one of the things that's going to require a significant amount of town resources in the next few months, it's recreational marijuana. And I think that's an indication that a lot of times we have a lot of these goals, but we also have to leave ourselves a little bit of room for the unexpected things that come up. And certainly educating the community and proposing warrant articles that give the town flexibility and allow us to implement whatever decisions town meeting makes, that takes a good amount of time.
At least it's not dogs, Mary.
God.
But we do have a look back.
Yes, we
have a
do.
look back scheduled
Can't
for.
wait.
We have a look back scheduled for later in the year.
I'd like to speak to the opportunity that the residents are going to have at this year's town meeting with respect to accessory dwelling units. You know, I happened to be on social media, saw some postings on Pinboard. I thought that the idea and the concept was well received by those that were chatting about it. You know, to me, it's an aspect of affordability that just simply cannot be denied. And where we have, you know, a fairly large segment of our community that's got a little bit gray on the top of their head, you know, that's something that I think we're long overdue with addressing. The ability to age in place and live where you've spent your life in an affordable way is something that I hope will resonate with the public on this particular zoning change.
Yeah, and I appreciate the planning board looking at this, because as we looked at one of our goals, which was to explore affordable housing opportunities, we recognize that accessory dwellings could potentially be one part of that solution. And I also hope it underscores that while the town has achieved an uncontested subsidized housing inventory above 10%, we remain committed to pursuing affordable housing in different ways. And I think this board also recognizes that with the two developments that are currently being built, that while all those units count as affordable, that for many of us in Hingham, those rents, even the affordable units, are not within reach. And so really what achieving that 10% does is it, I think, gives us some flexibility to create affordable housing that's more on our terms and that might help fill needs of members of this community that aren't being met right now.
Yes.
Terrific. Tom, this is really helpful, and I hope that residents will see as we get into warrant season that some of the warrant articles have to do with some of these goals, and that as we're also looking at the budget, there's also some relationship there, so thank you. We have 2 votes before Selectmen and Town Administrator reports. I'm going to do this one if I can, because I have a nervous husband at home who made me promise to make sure this got done. I'd like to make a motion to approve the issuance of a special one-day all-alcoholic beverages license to Fred Hussey on behalf of Hingham Sports Partnership for the Hingham Sports Partnership Winter Social to be held at the Hingham Community Center on Saturday, January 20th, 2018, from 7 p.m. to midnight.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, and Tom, we have a vote here for Eastern Minerals. People might remember a similar vote earlier.
So this was a procurement that was issued as a regional procurement through the town of Medfield, and we had been notified that after the initial award, there was a technicality with the issuance of the initial procurement. So they've reissued the procurement, and we've received new bids, and my understanding is they're the same as the old bids. So we're putting this contract back before you.
Okay,
Move that we sign a contract with Eastern Minerals. Are these guys out of South Boston? Do you know?
Lowell.
Oh, to sell and deliver to the Department of Public Works, CC solar salt delivered at $45.20 a ton, or treated salt delivered for $62.20 per ton.
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Tom, I realize you just gave us an update kind of on our goals and objectives, but did you have anything else for the Selectmen report?
Nope, there's all that.
Okay. I mean, Town Administrator report. Got my dates wrong, got my titles wrong.
You know, it's Tuesday. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Paul?
I'd like to recognize the performance of Hingham Fire. I happened to be attending a funeral mass at St. Paul Church yesterday morning when there was a gentleman that was stricken, and the call was made, the response was prompt, and the EMTs, paramedics discharged their duties professionally and quickly, so it was very impressive to see. I received a lot of positive comments from the assemblage that witnessed them in action. So thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Terrific. I do not have anything else to add at this time, just kind of working with the advisory committee on the budget. And those,
away.
going away, that's right. So with that, that concludes our meeting for this evening. I'd make a motion to adjourn.
I'd second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.